Hello, welcome to APL 360. My name is Jamie. This episode is part of my series on the APL 360 programming language. In this episode, I'm going to install a working APL 360 system on Windows 10. Let's get started. I'm starting at the website for MVT for APL. The web address will be in the description below. This system has been put together by Jürgen Winkelmann at ETH Zurich, and he says that the MVT for APL version 2.0 distribution features an OS 360 MVT 21.8F system designed for use with APL 360, an automated procedure to build APL 360 and the MVT supervisor calls it relies on from source, an automated MVT operator, APL pilot, an IBM 1052-7 and IBM 2741 terminal support, an OPFNS workspace supporting APL 360 operations, a comprehensive public workspace library, scripts and related software combining all components, and the MVT for APL version 2 user's manual. So you'll want to download the user's manual. And for new systems, there are two possibilities, a small user system and the large user system. I've downloaded and have unpacked the MVT for APL2 large current zip file. So I'm going to switch now to the user's manual. Jürgen Winkelmann has done an incredible job putting together excellent documentation for this system. There's good reading before this, but I'm starting at the bottom of page 6, which begins the steps that we will need for installation. He says 4 easy steps need to be performed to get APL 360 up and running. Number 1, prepare the terminal emulation. 2, set the time zone. 3, obtain the APL 360 source code from the Computer History Museum. And 4, start the APL 360 system. So he explains the difference just right above that between the small system, which has smaller workspaces and fewer of them, and the large system. So moving down, the first step in preparing terminal emulation will be to go to the folder where you've unpacked MVT for APL into the fonts subfolder and to install on Windows this particular font. There's also, besides the semi-italic version, there's also a regular version that you can install as well. And then we will go to the PuTTY subfolder, which is the terminal emulator, and within the session subfolder of that, we will install some registry settings that set up the particular parameters needed for running PuTTY with the correct options for APL 360. So I'm going to switch now to my folder where I have unpacked MVT for APL. And the first step is to go into the fonts subfolder. And then you'll see other fonts here. Some of these are recommended for Linux, others are recommended for Mac OS X or just Mac OS in general. So the ones that are for Windows will be the APL 360i semi-italic symbol, and then there's also a regular version of that as well. So I've gone ahead and installed both of those. You can double click on these and then press the install button for each one to have those installed. Now I'm going to go into the PuTTY subfolder and into the sessions subfolder of that. Then you will see an APL 360 Windows file. If you have extensions turned on, it will end in .reg. You'll want to double click on that and run. It will warn you that you are going to be editing the Windows registry, and that's something that you just don't want to do arbitrarily, and you want to make sure you trust the file that you are running. And so you'll need to say yes to continue to get those settings installed for PuTTY here. I've already done that on my system. Now going back to the documentation. So if your system does not use a US English keyboard natively, there are some other instructions that Jurgen includes here. So we'll skip past the instructions for Linux and Mac OS. And then go to the next section on setting the time zone. So there are two files for our Windows system that we need to edit. In the conf subfolder, there will be an MVT xcons and an MVT intcons file where we will need to set the TZ offset value for the particular time zone that we are in. So currently, I'm in the Midwest United States and we're on standard time. So I know my offset is minus 0600. You'll need to look up your offset if you don't know what it is. So let's go to that folder and see those files. So I'm looking for the conf subfolder, and then I'm going to double click on these. There is no standard editor that I have that will edit CNF files, so I'm just going to use Notepad to do that. These are just plain text files, so when it suggests what app that I want to use, I will use Notepad, but I don't want to use that for every CNF file. And then about 10 or 12 lines down, you'll see the TZ offset line, and you'll need to edit this to your particular value. So mine is minus 0600, and then I will save that file. So that was the xcons, and then I'm going to edit the intcons file the same way and set it also to minus 0600 and save. Okay, back to the documentation. Now you need to obtain the APL 360 source code. This, the license for the source code does not allow it to be redistributed, so it has to be downloaded from the Computer History Museum's website. So several years ago, IBM licensed the source code for this particular version of APL 360 to the Computer History Museum, and they allow it to be downloaded. And what Jurgen has done with MVT for APL has developed the procedures needed that when this is run the first time, it will compile and install APL 360 on MVT. So you'll need to go to this website and agree to the license, and then the download should start. It will download an APL 360 source code zip file, and then you'll need to open that up and copy the source code.txt file into this subfolder, into the source subfolder of your MVT for APL directory. So I'm going to do that now. I've already downloaded it and I have that zip file open, and here's the source code file. So I'm just going to click on it and use Control-C to copy, and then I'm going to go to my MVT for APL folder into the source subfolder, and then I'm going to paste the source code right here. And that's all that there is to that. So back to the documentation. Jurgen says that's it. You're ready to start APL 360 now. So on the Windows system, we'll go back to our MVT for APL folder, and we will double click on the apl360.bat batch file. You may get a message stating that a particular DLL is missing. This is a DLL for a particular Microsoft runtime library that's needed. And if that may have already been installed on your system, but it may not be. So you may get a message telling you to install it. And there are two links here. One is for 32-bit systems and the other is for 64-bit systems. I've had to do this on a previous system that didn't have it, and it worked fine. I just went ahead and downloaded the installer and installed that, and then I went back and clicked on the apl360.bat file, and it went ahead and worked just fine. So let's go ahead and find that batch file and click on it to start it. So I'll go back to my MVT for APL, and then I'm looking for apl360.bat. Again, if you don't have extensions, you won't see the extension. If you don't have the extensions turned on in your in the View tab for File Explorer, you can turn those on here if you want. Or you can recognize a Windows batch file with the gear icons on the left of the name. Some of these other files are for Linux, some are for Mac OS, but we need this particular one for Windows. So I'll double click on it. There will be a message that's going to warn you that this is an unrecognized app and that you might be at risk. The default option here is don't run, and there is no run button. It's hidden. You need to click here on more info to see the run anyway button. So now we'll go ahead and click run anyway. And the first time you run this, it recognizes that APL360 has not been installed, and so you will get a dialog to continue or not. I'll just press enter, and then the system will start and the installation process will start. Maybe I have to type Y and press enter here. Okay, so there it's starting. Sometimes in these command windows, I've noticed this, I don't always see the updated text showing up right away. So this will take a few minutes, and while that's happening, I'll go back into the documentation. You can watch this and see kind of the different aspects of installation. So it needs to bring up some of the MVT operating system, and then it goes through and compiles the source code, and then gets everything ready and packed into the right libraries and locations for APL360 to run on its own. So back in the documentation, there's some more information here that we will need later on. So Jürgen says that OS360 MVT will be IPL. That's mainframe lingo for booting up 4 times. After the 4th, an APL360 will come up, and you'll see in the console window in the MVT for APL logo. And it should go ahead and open up 2 PuTTY terminal windows. And Jürgen says APL360 is now up and running. It will, however, not accept any user sign-on before the recording terminal has been initialized. So of the 2 terminals that are open, one of them will need to be initialized as the recording terminal, and the other one will be a regular terminal that you can log in as a regular user. Now, to work with those terminal windows, you'll need to be sure to use the APL360 key map. So things will be in different locations than you're normally used to. So the parentheses, for example, are not going to be above the 9 and 0 keys. They're going to be on the semicolon and single quote keys. So there is in the documentation a map showing the APL360 keyboard, and I'm going to scroll up until I find that. Maybe it's down further. Need to see where that is. Let's see, maybe around page 13. So if I jump to page 13, this is the key map that you will need to use to enter in the symbols that are needed for APL. The text will be the unshifted keys, and those text characters are in the normal location for a US QWERTY keyboard. The shift of these characters then will be the symbols that you see above. So some things that are in different places that we're normally not used to. The question mark is the shift of Q. The asterisk is the shift of P. Here are the quotes and the square brackets over here in this location. The less than and greater than signs are up here on the numbers 3 and 7. And we also have less than or equal. The equal sign is on shift 5 and so on. So it would be a good idea to print out this page and to keep this next to you until you have the locations of these keys memorized. So I'll go back to the installation instructions. And we see that once the terminals come up, we'll need to log in on one of them as user number 314159. So let's see how our installation is going. Okay, so I had to press enter. Ordinarily, I don't have to do that, but sometimes this console window gets stuck, and it seemed to be just waiting for something, although it should be totally automated. But and maybe it was just thinking and pressing enter just updated the screen. So it doesn't always do this. Sometimes it does. So it looks like it's still working on bringing up the APL system, and then it runs as part of the APL 360 batch file. It recognizes that APL is running, and it will go ahead and connect to that system with these two terminal windows. And then we see the MVT for APL logo back here in the console window. And we don't need to use this console anymore. We need to make sure we don't close it, but we can hide it. And then in one of these windows, it doesn't matter which one. So I've seen on other computers that I've installed this on that sometimes I don't get two client windows open, or one of them will be open, but when I start typing in it, it seems to crash. So if you ever need to open up more of these on your own, in the MVT for APL folder, besides the APL360.bat file, there is also an APL360 client.bat file that, if you run that, will open a PuTTY terminal window. So you can click on that and open up more of these if you wish. But in one of these, we need to sign on as the kind of the operator user, which is right parenthesis 314159. There is no password. And then going back to the documentation, we need to so we see that the operator has logged on. We'll see a message about that. And then we will need to go into APL command mode by pressing Control A. And this isn't always necessary, but the way the recording terminal is supposed to work is that in this mode, it should be essentially read-only, and it will log things like when other users log on and other users log off on other terminals. So it's kind of like a hard copy of what's happening with some of those system activities. But to turn it into a kind of an operator terminal to put in APL, we need to send an attention signal, which has been mapped to Control A. So then we will load the operator functions OPFNS library. So I'm going to do Control A and then type in right parenthesis load OPFNS, and that will give us some commands to work with. The first one will be setting the date. The date for the underlying IBM mainframe emulator has been set 28 years behind the current date, so that the day of the week, month, and day of the month and month are set correctly. But APL will work fine by having the current date put in. So that's what we're going to do, is to tell APL what the current date is. So we will use, we'll do Control A again, and use set date, and then the single quote, which is Shift K. And then today is 02/23/21. And then we can see what other commands are available in this particular operator library by, again, doing Control A and typing in describe. And then there's several of these. The one I'm interested in now, I'll type in Control A and date to make sure the date is correct, and then we can do Control A and time. And if you set the TZ offset value correct in your conf folder in those files, this should be your current local time. Okay, so Jürgen says here at the bottom of page 11, if this is your first use of APL 360, it's recommended to conduct the sample APL 360 session on page 20. So I'll move up to page 20 and scroll towards the bottom. And then he explains in this, for this sample APL 360 session, you want to add some regular users. So he goes ahead and adds a couple users. I'll add those. And then I won't go through the rest of the sample session here. I'll do that in another video. But I will add these users and just show logging into the other terminal as a regular user and then shutting down the system. So the way that the add command works is we put in a user number, a username, and then a quota, which would say how many workspaces the user should get, counting from 0 up to that number. So we're going to add 2132, username Pilatus, and a quota of 50, and then user 1798, Rigi, R-I-G-I, and 50. So we'll do Control A and add 2132, Pilatus, 50, Control A, add 1798, Rigi, 50. Then I'll go to the other terminal that's not been logged into yet, and I will log in with right parenthesis, and let's say 2132. So now I'm logged in as user Pilatus. We see the APL 360 prompt, so we have a working APL 360 session now, and we can do things like 1, 2, 3 plus 4, 5, 6, and we can see that we're in desktop calculator mode of APL 360. So at this point, we'll go ahead and sign out of this user. So I will do right parenthesis off. And then this, if I wanted to, I could close this terminal window now, or just leave it open for another user to log in on, or it'll close during the shutdown process if I don't close it myself. Back here in the recording window, then I see a couple lines at the bottom of the user Pilatus signing in, and then we see at 17:23 and then logging out at 17:23 and 38 seconds. So now you want to make sure that you go through the shutdown process, that you just don't go and close the command window for APL 360, because it could leave things in kind of a dirty state. We want to make sure that we shut down so the system shuts down cleanly and is ready to be brought back up nicely the next time that we're ready to run APL 360. So In the operator window, I'll do Control A and then type in shutdown. And then it wants me to sign off now, so I will do Control A and right paren off. And then we'll go through, if we look in the command window here, it should start the shutdown process, which takes much less time than the boot starting up process. Now, the next time you start APL 360, it will start faster because it doesn't have to build the whole system. So then it's running stop all, and then this will go ahead and close everything out. So I hope that this video has helped you get a complete working APL 360 system, and I look forward to seeing you back for some of my other videos on APL 360. Thank you and take care.